Done. Hello, so here I am outside Abelard House, and I spent 6 years here, and by the time I left that was half my life. So I came here at the age of 7. More accurately, it was the day before my 8th birthday. So I'd visited several times. My sister Alex had been here, came up in 1983, and then Charlie was here. They overlapped for 1 year. So I visited lots, usually in the summer, these half terms. They celebrated their 50th anniversary the year before I came up. But anyway, I'm saying came up this Oxonian term. So I knew I was going to come here. I didn't want to come here. I was moaned about my American school in Saudi Arabia, but my parents used it as an excuse to kind of say it was a good thing. But they'd already made up their mind I was going to come here. They briefly considered Glenstal in Ireland. But so here it was. I came up. I'd been to Aitken and Niven in Edinburgh with my parents. It doesn't exist on the same site anymore. And they chose my uniform. They got my uniform. I was allowed to choose the colour of my trunk. I chose grey, partly because I was fascinated by the German army at the time, the Wehrmacht, not their political views. Anyway, so I was brought here by my mum, and it was 1st September, as I said. It was a glorious summer's evening still. And then Charlie was there in her uniform. I think I got into my uniform for the first time. I'd been up to find my dormitory corridor in the corner. And we got there quite early, and Charlie was reading the names, oh, Charles Shepherd. Okay, you have to do what he says, because his dormitory leader, Marc Bouchy, the Swiss boy, was a dormitory second. Didn't meet them yet. And then I was in there, and Sir Toby Coghill was headmaster. He was a real reaction, the last Victorian, a very forbidding and distant figure. I remember studying his face and seeing the purple lines, the split capillaries all over his cheeks. Frosty and intimidating character. Used to cane people, never did it to me, but cane them for actually quite trifling offences. A flagellomaniac. Anyway, and then his wife was called Lady Gay, although gay had the meaning homosexual at the time, and homosexuality was very much disapproved of. Gay meaning Gabrielle was really her name. I remember meeting her, and the crucial moment came when I was going to have to say goodbye to my mother, and I was in floods of tears, and Lady Gay was holding me with her arm saying, "Say bye-bye to mummy, say bye-bye to mummy," and I was blubbing, "Bye-bye, mummy," and Lady Gay rushed me away, and I feel a catch in the voice talking about it even now. Anyway, so up to the dormitory, and I met this boy who's about my own age, but short and weedy, and I'm thinking, who is this poor boy like me to be in this terrible situation? Because I've been this incredibly well-equipped American school in Saudi Arabia, and here we were at a relative dump, even though I'm supposed to be privileged to be here. But this boy, I thought, well, who is he from? Probably some orphan from Birmingham, because I know Birmingham was a hellhole. Anyway, it turns out his father was the Duke of Hamilton. That was Lord John Douglas Hamilton was in my dormitory. Who was there? Ben Forrest, who was in second form, I was in first form. And there's one other boy, Matthew Ruan. So Ben was the guide for all three of us. For the first 2 weeks was to show us the ropes. And we had 2 weeks grace, as in anything we did wrong in the first 2 weeks wouldn't count against us. So that was that. And I was crying that night, and Matron Allison came to try and comfort me, and it didn't work at all. So I was very unhappy about that. I remember having my trainers and putting them under the bed and couldn't find them the next day, and there was morning run. There was it was Ben Forrest's, was it his birthday as well? But I thought he was exactly the same age as me, even though he was a year ahead of me. And then he came down, and he had presents. He had some sort of whatever squidgy gun, and Matron Allison came in. We'll all be soaked. She said, "We've got no presents for you," which is quite upsetting for me on my birthday. And my mum came, and Charlotte and I went down the drive at Peace, that's mid-morning break, as in piece of food, and met her in the car, and she was saying goodbye. And she said, I'm going to have to go now, and blah, blah, blah. So I found that terribly upsetting. Here I was sort of stuck in Abelard House. Well, obviously, there are myriad other tales I could tell you about it. So that was that. I desperately didn't want to go to prep school, unsurprisingly. I would have been very messed up if I had, because would you prefer to stay with your parents? Do you prefer to go with complete strangers? What are you going to say when you're 7? And going to a new school is always frightening, but going to a school in a new country is even scarier. It's a boarding school too. I knew one person, my sister. At least I knew her. Must have been harder for Alex coming here not knowing a single person. So it was tough, and I really didn't want to come, and I protested about it and asked to leave for ages, thinking perhaps I could compromise. My mum and dad would let me come here part of the time, be in my American school in Saudi Arabia part of the time. Obviously it was so cold, the food was dreadful. I remember Charlie, when she arrived, they get out these plastic cups and plates, and she thought, this is hilarious, a doll's tea party. No, you have to eat off them. It was very primitive even for the era, because in real terms the fees were far, far lower. The costs were lower, so the food was of rather poor quality. But eating off these plastic cups and plates, things like that, it was big into sports, which I wasn't into. Rugby was anything I was decent at. We didn't start that for a while. I didn't want to play football. Sir Toby Coghill took us for football for a while, and I was in goal one time, and I was completely disinterested and took a piss in the goal while the match was up the other end. The others couldn't quite believe it. So one of the boys asked on my behalf why I had to play football if I didn't wish to, and the answer came back, because your parents want you to. Well, I suppose they had signed up for it. So here are the games pitches. I remember people coming, kicking rugby balls down here. They go all the way down here, where I first found out about the speed of light, the speed of sound, looking at people kicking balls and seeing the ball being kicked, and half a second later hearing the report of it being kicked, because obviously light travels much faster than sound. Look at these great oaks down here, this Scots baronial mansion. So we'll come closer. On this side we have the old staff library, as in the staff room. So my first headmaster was Sir Toby Coghill. He retired after my first 2 years. He'd been here for a quarter of a century, an Irish baronet. My parents were deeply impressed with that, because they're crashing snobs. And okay, he was Irish too. His ancestors from Castle Townshend. The Wikipedia article on Abelard House is mostly by me. So he'd been a live-in housemaster. Then the school expanded. He had a purpose-built bungalow for himself up by a pond, and then had a new head housemaster to live in. It was Mr. Duffy for the first few years. Later it was Mr. Logie. Mr. Duffy and I were not in sympathy. Logie was a decent guy, actually, an evangelical Christian. Although I scorned him, he wasn't a bad person. He never harmed anyone. His heart was in the right place. I'll say that to him. He wasn't unfair. And look at this grindstone thing. I remember Anna Haber dancing on it on Sunday afternoons, listening to music. Turned out to be quite a glamour person when she grew up. And the Duke of York came in my last term and planted a tree. Ben Goss, the head of school, had to lead 3 cheers to the Duke of York. I was anti-establishment at that stage, so I felt the heartiest disdain for the royal family. I suppose I still do, although I like them as an institution. But anyway, so then I invented the Duke of York challenge, climbing out one of my last nights, going all the way around. The doors were unlocked, and pissing on it. Thomas Forster wouldn't dare accompany me, hid in a bush over there. And I posted that on Facebook in 2010, and Mr. Gardner, who was later headmaster, said, "Did I mention the tree died?" I think it really has died, because a tree planted in 1993 would be way taller than that. I don't think it was in the middle of the grindstone, but it was somewhere here, like this. And I just see the photo of when the Duke of York visited, who's in a bit of trouble over this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing at the moment. So down here, where the blinds are down, that was the headmaster's office. Up above, that was Auchindoun. The Marquis of Clydesdale, he got in trouble for exposing his derrière out the window, because we had failures, number 1 failure, number 2, number 3 failure, depending on the seriousness. And then we had these people from Australia, New Zealand, like Brett, helping out, or Jeff, or I can't even remember the first one. And the New Zealander who was here at the beginning, a very tall bloke, Dave or something like that, and he wrote that, exposing his derrière out the window. This was Darnaway Dormitory, yeah, named after all local castles. Okay, so this was the girls' side. If you come over here, this was called Old Library. And later on, Mr. Hanson, who was headmaster for a year at a term, he used it for that, or a year and 2 terms. And this was the girls' side stairs, the wooden stairs. I didn't remember them being wooden, but they must have been. And there were more bushes through here. I remember a play was put on here, one of Aristophanes' plays, The Frogs, because after you finished common entrance in May, and then you had, if you were in 6th form, the last year of school, you had kind of almost nothing to do for the last months. They did loads of fun activities. They put on that play. Owen Watkin starred in it. And then here was Clover, a girls' dormitory. My sister was in it. I don't know why it's called Clover. No castle called Clover. Look at this archway. So look at the Emperor on either side. And through here, there were classrooms. There was a little library. There was an English classroom. There was an art room. There was technology when they expanded that. There was humanities, as in history and geography. There was mathematics. It's all been demolished since the school closed in 2004. Over there was a wooden cabin, the log cabin that Mr. Gardner built as an activity. Wednesday afternoons, no lessons, you had an activity, you could choose whatever, like flower pressing. I so wanted to be my sister, I chose to do flower pressing. And I was the only boy doing it. And I'm certainly not effeminate, so we had to do really boring stuff like archaeology or whatever, trying to find things with metal detectors. So over here, the Octagon, I had Latin lessons there with Mr. Caithness in my last year, and it was right after assembly. You always have to take some phone calls from parents after assembly, and they always come to us about 20 minutes late, halfway through the lesson. We'll be standing up on the chair to look out the window of the Octagon saying Caithness is coming. I tried to give him the name Alcazar, as in he resembled a Tintin character named Alcazar. I know means castle. There's a mini Octagon behind with a little pet like gerbils and hamsters. My mother's petrified of rodents, and Charlie had those. What a pet. I remember beside the stable block they used to have an area, a little garden to keep them. And so coming here on open days, that's end of May for the summer half term, you'd always see it in the most splendid weather, so form a completely false impression of what it was like. There was a there was a summer school here as well, and some children came to the summer school and then mistakenly came onto the prep school, the real school starting in September, thinking it was similar, but of course it was much harsher, and the food was ghastly by comparison. So Mr. Ling, a Chinese Scouser, was our chef, but I suppose he had to do it on quite a tight budget. So, and look, there's the mini octagon. And there's the maid's house. We used to call them maids, you know, if you say domestic staff, because they used to live in the stable block, actually, when I first came here, until that was purpose-built. There were various Nissan huts. I don't remember a Nissan hut being over there, actually. I could be wrong. Maybe it was always there. Memory playing me false. So in the early 80s, before I came here, they built a corridor to connect the old stately home, as it were, to the stable block. And they built these classrooms on where the cars are now. Yeah, the art room, the humanities room, the maths room, and then over here there was a gym, there's a music room, there's a swimming pool, but the swimming pool was only waist height, even when I was little, but that was that. And things like Sir Toby Coghill had people swimming in the nude, had girls swimming in the nude as old as 13. No boys there, he was there, and he was in the water. In fairness, he was wearing a swimming trunks, but still, and supervising girls' showers in the nude. Now, so far as I know, nobody ever said that he touched a girl inappropriately, but these days it can be considered highly suspect. But this was the 80s, it was a very deferential era in a rural place like this, and he was seen as a pillar of the community, and the police, you don't tangle with that. So there's the stable block, as it were. When it goes back to the days when this was the lower end of a stately home, obviously any big organisation had to have loads of horses. So this local Mr. Grant made loads of money, apparently some of it in slavery. He was the son of a local farmer, and Aberlar, the village, was very new. When I was at prep school, we were Aberlar. The school, we called ourselves Aberlar, didn't bother with house, never school. The official word name was Aberlar House, not Aberlar House School. And that village was just the village, and that was that. So a lot of people were crashing snobs. I mean, I crimson to mention that I absorbed this sort of social prejudices and this disdain towards people less fortunate than myself. Anyone went to state school looking down on them, which is obviously ridiculous, as most of my cousins went to state school, you know, and my grandparents were working class, so my origins are lowly. But it was almost impossible not to be influenced by my milieu, and that's a lesson I've tried to bear with me, that it's difficult to blame people for certain attitudes, because these attitudes, they're just absorbed, they're contagious. It's very difficult to resist a sort of indoctrination. It wasn't even official indoctrination, and there were a few brave and wise souls who spoke out and said, no, that is rebarbative. You don't scorn people just because of the sort of school they did. It doesn't make you a good person, a bad person. A lot of people here were complete merkins. These bushes are new, so this is the stable block. And there really had been stables here as recent as the 60s, but the stables were somewhere else later on, and the stable was run separately. Lee Barwell, that was her name, she ran it, and she left to marry a vet. And it was over there. Then Mrs. Ryder, came along, and she ran that business. So here was a stable block. Look at the bell up top. I had the duty of ringing the bell occasionally. And then there were classrooms in here. My very first day, obviously, first form and second form were taught together, taught by Mr. Black, lovely chap. I mean, even decades later, he inspires loyalty. An Olympic gold medalist for swimming. I can't remember what went in there. We played board games in there occasionally. In this room, Mrs. Strachan worked with what we now call SEN, me and my handwriting, people with their maths, people with dyslexia. And Charlie absolutely loathed her, and she was made to stand outside for being rude sometimes, doing stuff that's too easy. This is the library here on the ground floor, but the maids had lived there for my first couple of years. That became a library. And through here, the classics room, Mr. Channon teaching Latin and classical civilization. The French room in this corner here, Mr. Mulvey, then Mr. Scott. And there's a lavatory. The swimming pool was through there, probably locked. And this was the computer room, later became one of the junior classrooms. This was sort of a classroom as well, first form and second form or third form. And in the corner there were little individual music practice rooms. I used to love playing board games there rather than watching films on Saturday night. Then there was some sort of bizarre little house with a kitchen in here. And this was where there was skis were kept, my skis. And there was a bike sheds over there. We used to play games out here, running around, hiding, trying to stab each other, water fights. I can't remember what this blue thing is here. Even by disco was sort of my last night here or something like that. So that's that. Aberlar House. It's, absolutely jam-packed with memories. Time and place is what fascinates me. So, a lot of water under the bridge, the River Spey in this case. Well, it's melancholy to reflect that I was unhappy a lot of the time, but that's no good in just crying over spilt milk. There were some happy times here. I got to remember I could have been a lot worse off. You can switch it off now.